Welcome to Law Subscribed. This is your dedicated news source for all things subscriptions and the law. My name is Matthew Kurbis. I'm the subscription attorney, and I believe subscriptions can help bridge the access to justice gap and incentivize attorneys to modernize and scale their practice like never before. In this episode, I interview Jared Correia. Jared is the founder of Red Cave Law Firm Consulting, co-founder of Gideon Software, and a fellow and OG podcaster in the legal space. I was thrilled to interview Jared because I've been listening to legal podcasts for over a decade, and until I started Law Subscribed, it was Jared who had more guests on his show than any other who used or talked about the subscription model for legal services, making him a veritable expert on alternative fee arrangements for lawyers. Thank you to my sponsors, 650 and Gavel, links to both in the show notes and more on them later. You could sign up for the waitlist for my subscription seminar at subscriptionseminar.com. Please share this podcast with someone you know who would be interested in it. This podcast is for educational and entertainment purposes only, and nothing said is legal, ethical, or financial advice. Without further delay, here's the episode. Jared Correia, welcome to Law Subscribed.
Thank you. I don't know what I did to get on Law Subscribe, but I'm truly honored, sir. Thank you for having me.
Well, it is the only podcast exclusively dedicated to subscriptions in the law. So, I think you've earned it.
Which is pretty amazing. Kudos to you, sir. That's amazing. I love niche podcasts like this. Let's do it.
Well, you yourself are what I like to call an irreverent podcast host. And
it's very charitable. Thank you.
I think you do other things too, though. So, maybe you should introduce yourself to my listeners and tell them actually what you do.
Oh, yeah, sure. I'll start with the podcast stuff. I got two podcasts. I do one's called The Legal Toolkit on Legal Talk Network, and that's the irreverent one. That's essentially like a late night talk show format. Where it's a podcast, but I do a monologue. We interview a guest. We play like a game or a sketch at the end. It's pretty fun. And then I got one with Above the Law called the Non-Event Podcast, which is essentially like technology focused. We interview like founders of technology companies. That was pretty fun too. And then I got two businesses that I run or help run. I've got a consulting company called Red Cave Law Firm Consulting, which does business management advice for law firms. And then I've got a chat and document assembly legal software that I am part owner of as well. So I try to stay busy.
Yeah, I've been a long time listener of Legal Talk Network in general. It was hard to believe, but in prepping for this interview, I was looking back at how long I've been a listener of just the network, and I'm pretty sure I started listening in law school, and I started going to law school in 2011.
Oh Lord, I've been podcasting since 2006. Now you're making me feel old.
Yeah. I've listened to them a lot more, nowadays.
Right.
But back then, even I remember listening to Legal Toolkit, and it's really evolved, or degenerated. Is that
degenerated would be the term I'd use. Yeah, I worked on them for years before they allowed me to do what I wanted to do. So it took about 10 years, but we made it, and we haven't been banned yet. So.
Well, I do have to say it is like when I see your episodes go live and Above the Law, Thinking Like a Lawyer go live, I know it's like a breath of fresh air from the legal podcasts, that I normally get, which I still like and enjoy, but for very different reasons.
Yeah, we try to do 1/3 to 2/3 legal every time. And we are hewing a little bit closer to 1/3 legal at this point. But I got a lot of interest, man. You know that.
I know. And and I even tried to have you back when I was doing LTN stuff for the Young Lawyer podcast, Young Lawyer Rising.
Yes.
I was the occasional host of that podcast when the main host needed somebody to help out. I would write for the show, the end segments, the Financial Wellness Minute, and then I had one of the opportunities I had to host. I really wanted to have you on for the subscription model. That was before I decided to launch this podcast, before I decided to launch my own firm, and it just timing didn't work out. I guess it was because
I remember that. I think I was on vacation maybe or something.
Yeah, we were gonna record. You had to delay, but then by the time you came back, the situation changed. So, but anyway, I'm glad to have you here.
Better late than never, right?
Absolutely, and on my own show instead of
even better. Even better.
I think so. So just listening to your shows, over the years and doing what you do, for the consulting firm that you run, I think other than like my podcast, which is very new in the space, I think
Mhm.
you've interviewed and talked to more guests about alternative fee arrangements and the subscription model than at least anyone else in the podcast sphere who I
That
listen
might be
to in the
true.
legal space.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's really the reason you say you don't you're not sure how you ended up here. That's why you're here. Is because I think you're the closest thing to like an expert other
Oh,
than
wow.
me. I'm trying to
Appreciate
establish
that.
myself, on like
Yeah.
the subscription model and alternative fee arrangements in general, or at least as far as putting yourself out there is concerned.
Yeah, I'm glad someone was counting the episode numbers because I certainly wasn't. But I try to push like the subscription and AFA thing. I have for years, and like, you know how it is, man. You keep running into like this billable hour stuff, and nobody wants to change anything in legal. Now, there's like a lot of attorneys out there who are getting more aggressive about trying things in subscriptions, trying different pricing models. But I'll tell you, like, I work with some innovative lawyers, and it's still like pulling teeth for a lot of people. They have some struggle with it. They go back to what they were doing before. And it's been like, man, the unkillable billable hour, it's really a thing. It's hard to overcome for sure. What's
Yeah.
cool about you and other attorneys is like you are younger attorneys who are running practices, either they're solo or small firms, and you can do whatever you want. And I found that like as we've moved forward in time, a lot more people are willing to do that. So as these older attorneys start to retire, or start to like wind down their practices like a lot of them did during the pandemic, there's so many more opportunities for alternative billing models, which I'm personally excited about. It's been a long time coming.
Yeah, I mean, I sort of lovingly refer to them as the old guard and the legacy model. It's as nice as I could be about it.
That's pretty nice. Yeah, I usually refer to them as old white guys, but you're doing better than I am.
It's both true. Both true.
Yes, right, right.
Oh man. Yeah, it's I do think age has something to do with it. I also think just sort of like it's reached a tipping point with the stress that young lawyers are going through with the billable hour and what that's putting them through, and especially like women attorneys who I've had like most of my guests have been women attorneys who are doing something
Interesting.
or want to do something with the subscription model because they are penalized for being efficient. And
Yeah,
and, and
yeah.
this is a way out, and the big law firms have a retention problem for women, and the billable hour I think is one of the main causes for that retention problem.
Oh man, yeah. I'm happy to get into all this stuff because this has been a thorn in my side for years. Like, I don't know why you would want to work for a big law firm if you're a female attorney. Like, honestly, like I'll just say it. Like, I think it's really hard to square that model with what you want to do in your practice and in your life. And I've actually worked with a ton of female founder attorneys who do some really interesting things in their practice. And the management models they bring to bear in most cases, I think are so much more innovative than what the big firms are doing, that once they get out of that situation, like they're in my to my mind, they're often much more creative than the male attorneys who found practices, because a lot of the male attorneys who found practices, they just do the same thing they were doing before because it was a fairly cushy gig for them. But female attorneys are often forced to innovate, and they innovate in pricing models, they innovate in the way they work with their staff, they innovate in the way they work with their clients. And I've seen people do some amazing things, honestly. But more broadly speaking, like as soon as you get out of that big law model and you can do whatever you want and you have the courage to do it, like you can craft a law firm exactly the way you want it to be. And using subscription models gives you more time to do the things you want to do. Like, and this is not just a male female thing. Like, hey, I want to hang out with my kids too. I want to coach the baseball teams. And being able to run a subscription model, being able to figure out productization so you can make money, quote unquote, while you sleep, all that helps, I think. So I'm glad you're pushing the envelope on all this stuff.
Yeah, yeah, and legal tech is a big part of productization. We've also had on the show,
Oh,
well, it
for
hasn't
sure.
gone live at the time that I'm interviewing you, Corey Kelly from Legal Karma, and
Oh, yeah. He's
their
a great dude.
product, yeah, that product could really help lawyers productize their legal services, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Well, not to get too far afield, but there's so many products that are coming out now that are working from a subscription basis. So you run a subscription law firm. Let's build a product that supports you. There's more intake or customer service software than there's ever been before. Like up until recently, like most of this stuff was back office. And I'm really encouraged that I'm seeing a lot more front office technologies come out, and also technologies that are built for different pricing models. So that's really encouraging to me personally.
Yeah, yeah, and then on the other side of it, you still have, because it's such a small part of the market, right? Of attorneys doing that. So I understand why these
Yeah.
legal tech companies are still explaining why their product works for the billable hour. Like, to mention
Oh,
another,
for sure.
like
Yeah.
Lawyerist also talks about how they want to kill the billable hour, but then they have an advertiser on that's like, this is how you can, improve your billable hour. So like it's
Right.
impossible
Right.
to escape it.
I shouldn't be throwing shade at anybody either because I've done my share of ad reads for the billable hour. And like sometimes people get after me on Twitter and stuff like that for the billable hour thing. But I'll tell you, like ignoring it is like ignoring a massive segment of the market. So I'm happy to push the envelope, but there are attorneys out there who are doing it and they're not going to change and they need some support too, honestly. But I am an advocate of like if you're going to choose something like an hourly model or any type of pricing model, you really want to be thoughtful about it. And a lot of attorneys are not. They're just like, I'm going to do this because it's worked for however many years. And they just do it. And they're not really thinking, like, oh, does this actually work for my business? Does this work for my lifestyle? So I'm a fan of like, if you're thoughtful about it and you launch a pricing model or a system within your practice that's going to work for your business and your lifestyle, more power to you. And that can be different for everybody potentially.
Yeah, and I've seen some, and I think these firms are like owned by women too. To like bring it back to that, is like there are some
Mhm.
firms out there that have like marketplaces like a for
Yeah, which
documents
is
on
really
their
smart.
website, but the but and it's flat fee, which is great, but it's missing an opportunity for adding a subscription layer to that where you could get
Yeah.
access to all the documents that are updated, but for a monthly fee versus like a one-time payment. And maybe you want to have both, or maybe it's like a lower payment. There are different ways to adapt the model, and that's when I get interviewed. That's questions I get. Well, how could I adapt the model to this area of law or that area of
Mm.
law? That's why I have the podcast. There's so many different ways. I mean, like you said, you're representing innovative, or you're working with innovative attorneys.
Oh yeah.
So what are some of the things that they're doing?
Yeah, I think this is a great point you bring up because I think when a lot of people hear the term subscription, like they're only thinking about that like classic retainer type of arrangement where you get paid monthly and you forgo other representation. It's much more than that. Like you talked about it. Like a lot of these subscription models could entail products as well. So when I talk to lawyers about this, some of the things we talk about is like, okay, the pricing model is a subscription, but what do you get with that? Maybe you get a certain number of hours from the attorney. Maybe you get a weekly meeting or check-in. Some attorneys I talk with, they have a special texting line for their subscription clients. They can get in quicker than anybody else, right? That's kind of like the lightning lane at Disney World. I just came from Disney, so I may have some Disney analogies here.
Sounds good.
Selling the documents, right? That stuff's helpful too, as well. But selling access to new and revised documents, like not just getting access to it once. How about exclusive podcasts for subscription holders, specialized content for those people as well? I've seen people do like monthly group meetings with clients to address issues across the board. Like, let's say you were a corporate attorney who's working with a bunch of different corporations. Well, maybe instead of doing a newsletter that's the client alert, part of the subscription package is you hold like essentially a open meeting where you talk about these issues and people can ask questions. I've seen people have a lot of success with that. So right off the top of my head, I think I just rolled off like 7 or 8 different things that you could attach to a subscription package, but most people never get to that level. They're not thinking of it as a package. They're thinking of it as exclusively a pricing model. And if you go beyond that, there's a lot of interesting stuff you can do that'll also differentiate you from attorneys in your field, which is really where you really why you want to be doing this, as well as like some of the other benefits. But it's a competitive advantage to be different in terms of your pricing and service delivery.
So, has there been any areas that you've seen having that have difficulty adapting the model?
Yeah, for sure. I think the most common one is like litigation, obviously. I think it'd be really tough to do a subscription type model in litigation environment. I don't think any of this is impossible, by the way, but I think it would be harder. And a lot of attorneys tell me, yeah, like, you never know which direction this is going to take. You get one motion ruling back and you're in trouble potentially. It's stuff that involves settlements of some kind, like contingency work. Really hard to do it there, obviously. Although I could think of ways that you could have subscriptions that are kind of sitting astride the settlement work that you do. I'm trying to think of other areas that I've just come across a firm that's doing like subscription for estate planning, which is something I don't see very often. But I think it's tough for a lot of attorneys to do that. So those are some of the categories I've seen that people have had trouble with. But as far as I'm concerned, I'm kind of in a position where if somebody comes to me and they're like, I want to create a subscription model or a new type of billing model. I try not to do like the one size fits all consulting. When I talk to firms, I'm like, you're different from every other law firm. Let's build a model that's very specific to your practice, so it's different from everybody else, so you can access that competitive advantage, and so that it works specifically for you in your environment. And so every subscription model I design in association with law firms is a little bit different. So I think you could make it work in any situation, but those are some of the ones I've seen that are pretty tough. I don't know if you have any in mind that you think are like harder to develop subscriptions or not. And I don't mean to turn this over onto you and start asking you questions. I'm just interested to know because I'm a curious guy.
I mean, you've been an interviewer for so long.
I
As
know
a
it's hard to
podcast
get
host.
out of it. Yes.
Yeah, and you know, not to derail it too much, though. I figured that was going to be inevitable having you on the show. Is there's sometimes attorneys get some flack for saying, for thinking I'm a special snowflake. I'm different from every other lawyer. But you kind of just showed that there is a little bit of nugget of truth there, right? And
Yeah.
you're trying to help them, make the firm that actually emphasizes that they're a very special snowflake, not like anyone else.
Well, I think it's funny because I'm glad you brought this up because I talk to lawyers about that a lot. And that's a term I use quite a bit. Like, you're not a special snowflake. I tell that to attorneys all the time. And a lot of it's in the context of like document automation, for example, or like intake workflows. Like, why do you need to be on like a call to schedule another call with a client? Like, that's a colossal waste of your time. Or like, how different do you think your estate planning templates are from that next firm's estate planning templates? They're not that different, let's be honest. And a lot of people are pulling those from like the same source, like a wealth counselor. I knew attorneys who used to pull that stuff from like LegalZoom. They take their templates and reconvert them for the law practice. So it ain't that different. But I think you can become a special snowflake, quote unquote. I'm trying to work in a Frozen analogy. I'll see if I can get there. But if you're doing like a different pricing model, if you're doing a subscription model that is quantitatively different or qualitatively different from other people's, like you've got this special texting line that other people don't have, you've got these town meetings other people don't have, then you are a special snowflake to the consumers and you can sell that. I think lawyers can be special and different. Most of them don't access the opportunity. That's the way I look at it.
Yeah, so yeah, I think that's a good distinction there of what aspects of the practice of law is unique and not. Right?
Yes.
And
Yes.
the value proposition and the business model, that can be unique. But how you're delivering the legal services, that's something that can and should be streamlined. And frankly, if you
Yes.
don't do that, you're not going to be able to adopt an alternative fee arrangement because you're not billing for your time anymore. You got to be as efficient and effective as possible.
Right. Right. It's a totally different model. And that's what a lot of people struggle with. Lawyers are really good at being inefficient traditionally, as you know.
Yes, as I know.
But it's funny. I do not to go down a wholly different route, but like I've had a lot of these conversations lately, which is why I bring it up. Like over the last 2 weeks or so, I've got attorneys who are telling me like, "Hey, I tried flat fees and I'm taking a bath on it. Like it's not going well for me." And this is an issue I have with lawyers on a recurring basis. Lawyers are not good at math, like even basic math. I'm like, okay, we're on a call right now. We're on Zoom. Let's figure this out. Like, let's not guess anymore. So I'm like, okay, how many hours did you put into this case? What's your average billable rate? Because some people are doing like subscription stuff, product stuff, aside billable. So they'll tell me, we'll get the math together. I'm like, all right, you do an hourly billing, you would have made $3,000 on this case. What do you charge for a flat fee? They're like 4,500. Invariably, they charge more on the flat fee. And so I'm like, you're just making a presumption that you're taking a bath on these cases because you feel like you're doing more work. It's probably uncomfortable for you to adopt a new pricing model. But in actuality, when we look at the numbers, which you should be doing on a regular basis as a business person, you're kicking ass. You're making like 1/3 more than you would have if you were charging this as an hourly rate. And that's the way that's the way it works out for most people. They just don't do the math. They feel like they're doing more work. They feel uncomfortable and they're out. Like they don't let it sit. They don't gather enough data to get a big enough sample size. But if you want to commit to something like this, you should commit to it. And you, again, being thoughtful about it and actually looking at the numbers. A lot of people don't.
Yeah, and sometimes just having like an Excel spreadsheet set up where you could like
Yeah.
plug in what you're making and what your projections are. Like when you like I'm running a subscription and flat fee business,
Yeah.
and I'm very easily able to predict my annual expenses because frankly they're mostly subscriptions,
Hmm.
right?
Yep.
and
Yep.
and just what my subscription revenue is, and just to make sure it's the subscription revenue is more than the annual expenses. And when you're dealing with the subscription, it becomes really easy to do math like that. And then basically any flat fee work I get on top of that is gravy. But that is the harder, more difficult work is the flat fee
It
work
is.
than the subscription
Yeah.
type work.
Well, it's funny when I talk to lawyers about it, like as we move from like this notion of like hourly billing to flat fees to subscription billing, like it's easy to get to those average numbers if you're using subscriptions, if you're using flat fees. Because a lot of the struggle I have when I'm doing revenue projections with hourly billing firms is we're trying to get at, okay, what's the average amount of money you make per case? And that can fluctuate wildly in an hourly billing practice. So it's really hard to do those revenue projections. But if you're doing flat fees, if you're doing subscription fees, you know what each client's value is to you for the course of the month, for the course of the year. It's really easy to turn those revenue projections around, like you said. And that's really simple math that you can do on a spreadsheet. So there's some
Yeah.
advantage to that, streamlining the administration of the business.
Right. You basically cut out your billing department if everything's paid for up front and automated.
Yeah.
Uh,
Right.
and
And yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, and to get back to that question that you did ask me about
Yes.
what like sort of my thoughts
Oh,
are on
yeah, yeah, yeah.
what
Go
doesn't
ahead.
work, just to tie it back in, you mentioned how it doesn't really work for litigation, but I think it can. And
Okay.
and I think it can in this way. I think it's a combination subscription flat fee to eliminate the billable hour, right? And I think in high volume type cases, so foreclosure, insurance defense, debt collection, like this is going to more easily fit into that type of
Hmm.
practice for litigation. But I think,
Yeah.
and I don't know because it hasn't been done, but I think a well-designed, model, this could work for other types of litigation as well. But you have a flat fee to start. And what that is sort of depends on the nature of the case, right? Like you're going to have to look at the market, but you have a flat fee to start. Then you get a monthly amount every month from the client. So let's just do
Hmm.
insurance defense because that
Yeah.
is like where I have a background in insurance defense. So the insurance
Sure.
company pays you, X thousands of dollars to start the case, and they could call, for analyzing the documents, filing an appearance, answering the complaint, contacting the client. That's all that stuff covers like a lot of work that needs to be done right in the beginning. Then you pay maybe in the hundreds per month. So it's like a guaranteed. The firms have monthly income. Maybe it's thousands. It sort of depends on is it a property insurance related issue or a personal injury insurance related issue. So every context is different. So you get X amount flat fee in the beginning, Y amount per month. That's a lower amount, and
Mhm.
then you have a carrot at the end saying, hey, if you settle the case, you get this additional flat fee. So there's
Yeah.
incentive to end the litigation sooner because then the firm would make more money and the client will be happy because the case is resolved. But if it goes to trial, it's maybe a multiple of that flat fee per week
Yeah.
or something. So
Yeah. Yeah.
you're incentivized to, and you can look at the billable hour. Insurance defense
Well,
firms
you see
especially,
success fees and billable hours from time to time as well.
right?
Yeah.
They should have tons of data on like what the average case they're earning on versus how long it takes them, and you could like they have access to so much data. They should be able to easily adapt this formula that I'm recommending
They should.
to litigation model. And then you don't have to bill
Right.
by the hour. Think about
Yeah.
all the administrative burden of the insurance companies and the law firms with their billing departments going back and forth over bills and striking this and that. I mean, you just eliminate that waste. So that has value too.
Oh, for sure. I like it, man. That's a great pitch. Now somebody's going to go out there and do it. Somebody listening to the show, make that happen. It's funny, like you address data too, right? Yeah, the data is great. A lot of people don't take the time to analyze it. So let's do that also.
Yeah. Yeah, but it requires creativity, right? And so
Yes.
I've only run that idea by a few people before, and so like that
Oh,
that's your initial
I
reaction.
feel honored. I love it. I think
Yeah.
it's great.
Okay. I mean, because I don't know. I'm just some dude on the internet who's a lawyer talking about the subscription model, and I'm shouting into a void. Except for when I have guests on or people reach out who have listened to the
Yeah.
show.
Yeah. Well,
right?
my thing in legal or any business is always like, let's try it and see how it goes. Like nobody's run an idea by me that I think is so stupid that it's not worth trying. Well, maybe there's been like 4 or 5, but like a lot of lawyers are very risk averse. So before like a lot of the pandemic era rules were changed for ethics. So brand names, for example, you couldn't have a brand name as a law firm for a really long time. And now most states allow it. As a lawyer, like lawyers are very risk averse. They don't want to try something like that. I remember I had somebody who came up to me several years ago and they're like, I want to call my law firm like Flying Fish Law. I think I'd have a really cool logo, but I can't do it. I'm like, of course you can. Why can't you do it? So my whole thing is like lawyers are so risk averse, they almost never experiment with things. So somebody could take that model that you just described, try it, see how it works in the real world. Like software companies beta test stuff all the time. Like you can do that as a law firm as well. Most people are just unwilling to do it. And I think for the flat fee services, for the subscription services, like it's a new model for a lot of legal consumers. So you almost have to go out there, launch something, see how it works, iterate on it, and make it work for your practice. And that's what every business that's not a law firm does. Lawyers are just so reluctant to do anything that's out of the ordinary because they have this notion of what it is and means to be a lawyer that they don't want to deviate from. But if you do it, there's that massive competitive advantage we talked about. So I tell people all the time, like, unless it's like a really harebrained or unethical idea, like try it and see how it goes. What's the worst thing that happens? You reel it back in and you try something else. Okay, no problem.
When I went solo, I pivoted from mostly litigation to a transactional-only practice. I did not have a database of documents to automate. That's why a business and employment legal document database and automation tool like 650 is super useful. I can rely on the quality of the documents in 650's database since they're putting excellent legal minds to work curating and updating their documents and automations over time. When you're not billing by the hour, outsourcing and efficiency matters, and 650 can help you scale your practice to get high-quality documents drafted in less time. Use the code LAWSubscribed at 650.com and when being onboarded to get 10% off. If you're not a business and employment attorney, or you have your own documents that you'd prefer to use, then my next sponsor, Gavel, is the automation tool for you. Gavel allows you to build shareable, client-facing workflow and document automations. In other words, Gavel helps you create a legal practice where attorneys can monetize the value they bring clients in productized form at scale via subscriptions and flat fees. Use the code LAWSubscribed at gavel.io to get 10% off an annual subscription. There's no one right way to automate and scale your practice, but with one or both of my sponsors, 650 and Gavel, you can take your subscription law firm to the next level. Links to both in the show notes. Now back to the show. Yeah, and you skirted around the jargon, but what you just talked about was agile methodology, right? I mean,
Yeah,
essentially,
pretty much. Yeah. Yeah.
you know,
Although a lot of lawyers don't use that term, which is why I skirt around the jargon. But you're right. Yes.
yeah, yeah. And I think a lot of them, would think like agile, like physically agile, like they don't,
Yeah.
they wouldn't even know.
Yeah. I used to be physically agile like 10 years ago. Now I'm just business agile. But yeah, the experimentation I think is important. And what I found is like a lot of these new lawyers are willing to try things out differently. They're focused on efficiency, which I mean, if you look at some of the studies that are out there statistically at this point, and this is simple math too, like the lawyers that can run a more efficient practice and charge in a different way, they end up making more money just because they can take on more volume of work than their competitors can take on. It's not a great idea to run your business as slowly as you possibly can.
Yeah, and there's a massive market opportunity because there's so many people priced out of the billable hour.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Even lawyers,
Yes.
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 They have trouble. I mean, that's a joke, but it's also a sad reality.
It is. It's totally true. The other thing I think that's interesting here, not to hijack the interview, but this just came to my mind, and I don't know if you've talked about this on the show yet, is that like I think one of the problems with moving to a subscription model or a model that involves flat fees is it's a slightly different way to bill your clients as a law firm. Law firms are used to collecting in arrears. Law firms are used to saying, you owe us 10 hours this month for X. If you look at a lot of the ethics attorneys out there who work for the various state bars, they're only used to that model. So there's a little bit of a push to do that because that's what everybody understands. But I view like the invoicing arrangement or the billing arrangement for a subscription or for a flat fee practice a little bit differently. I view it as more of like a telephone bill, right? Like you're in our grandfathered in package. You're in the ultimate package. You get these things. Here's almost your activity report with us for the month. This is how we show value to you, which kind of gives you some cool opportunities because you can say, okay, you're in package A right now, but you've been utilizing services beyond package A. So let's move you into package B. For like a corporate attorney, for example, somebody who's outside general counsel, that's a great way to upsell services to people. But it's a wholly different way to provide billing or invoicing to people. And a lot of people can't get their heads around that. A lot of attorneys can't get their heads around that as well, which is one of the things that makes this difficult also.
Yeah, I mean, that is a genuine new thing that of all the interviews that I've had, like the activity report sort of a thing, that is not something that's come up on the show before. Because there, for the listeners, by the time you're listening to this episode, you'll have heard all the other ones, but they're not all
Yeah.
published live. So even if Jared wanted to go and like listen to every episode, I still have 10 in the can that need to get published, right? So that is I really love that part of it. But one of the other reasons that I had you on is a similar reason I had Steve Fretzen on, and that is
Steve Freston. Yes.
yeah is I'm running my own practice.
He's not
right?
as funny as me, but he's a good consultant.
Yeah. Well, but you guys do different things, right? And so like he's the business development guy, and at the end of the day, it's like, well, I'm running my own practice and doing this podcast. And so I've had attorneys reach out to me and they're like, hey, I want to launch a subscription model. It's like, well, that's what I have the podcast for. Like, I'm not a consultant. Like, I'm not helping them launch that.
Right.
And so it sort of dawned on me, I need to have experts on that are not just lawyers doing the subscription model and technologists. I need to have, if you want to launch a subscription model, but you can't have a book of business, well, I had Steve Fretzen on, right? And so you're a consultant for lawyers for their businesses. Like you said, you work with clients who are doing innovative things. So I wanted to have you on so we could talk a little bit more about what you do too, because if lawyers, if they're listening, they want to launch a subscription model and I don't have time other than the podcast, maybe they could reach out to you. So let's talk about Red Cave Consulting a little bit.
Oh, sure. Yeah. And Steve is great, by the way. He's awesome on the business development stuff. He's got a lot of resources, his website also. He's got a unique last name, so he can name his business after his name, and nobody can pronounce my last name, so I had to go in another direction. In terms of the consulting business, so the pitch I have for people, and I've probably worked with like 4,000 or so law firms over the course of the last 15 years, everywhere, like big law firms, small law firms. It's really interesting to all these different people about how they run their businesses. But the general thesis is, when I talk to people, I'm like, if you had a law partner like in the business who actually understood how to run a business, wouldn't that be great? You'd have a sounding board. You'd be able to run these ideas by somebody. You'd be able to execute on something. You wouldn't feel frozen all the time because you have a million different things to do. And that's how I work with a lot of people. So my thesis is like, let's get on a call on a regular basis, like usually bi-weekly or monthly for most of the people I work with. And let's get this task list together. And let's just chip off that task list on a recurring basis. It could be you want to change your pricing model. It could be you need to implement new technology. It could be you need a new marketing strategy. It could be you need to hire somebody, you need to grow. And we'll just do those things one by one until you move forward. And look, I'm not like anything special here. Like the deal is like, if you actually spend time, like even an hour every 2 weeks thinking about your business, you're going to make more money. You just are, because a lot of your competitors are just in the work all the time and they're not thinking about that stuff at all. So the way I kind of run the consulting is we talk regularly. We have a task list. We chip down on it. You get more things done. You get more efficient. You make more revenue in a nutshell. And that's worked. So I used to work before I started my own company for the state of Massachusetts. They had a free consulting service. And I worked there for about 8 years or so. And there's like 60,000 attorneys in Massachusetts. Fun fact, there are 9 law schools in Massachusetts. And if you look at the Massachusetts on a map and how small it is, you're probably like, how do they fit 9 law schools in the state? Not very comfortably. There are a lot of attorneys. So a lot of attorneys looking for advice. But I would talk to somebody. We'd have a great conversation, send them a follow-up email. Here are the 7 things you want to do next. And then they wouldn't call me back for 3 years. And I'm like, hey, how's it going? I remember that great conversation we had. Did you do anything? And they're like, nope. And we were starting from square one every time. So having somebody to have a conversation with who's going to make you accountable, who's going to push you forward on some things, even if it's uncomfortable, like that seems to work pretty well. And it's worked for like the last 10 years or so that I've been doing this business. So that's kind of how I work with people on the consulting side. And I should mention, I do work with bar associations as well. We've got, I want to say, like 15 partnerships with state, city, and county bars where we're the primary consulting provider for those bars, which is kind of cool too, because we can work with lawyers from all these different states as well. And those are kind of but similar model, like a triage model. Some of those people I work with on a recurring basis, some of them it's more like we do have a conversation once every year or so. And sometimes stuff gets done and sometimes stuff doesn't. But it's really cool to have been doing this for as long as I have and to kind of seen the evolution in law practice. It's slow, but it's happening. And every year, I think lawyers get a little bit more innovative, a little bit less risk averse. And I think that's really a good thing for the profession.
Yeah, and it could be a whole other podcast on how there is a fight against that with like the recent ABA House Delegates resolutions, right?
Yeah.
So that's a whole other, half
One step
hour.
forward, two steps back. Yes.
Right. And but here's the thing, to their credit, if the bars, if the ABA and all the lawyers that actually speak up in the ABA believe that we shouldn't be doing fee sharing and shouldn't be having non-lawyers own law firms, then we got to start innovating, like adopting the subscription model, killing the billable hour, and scaling your practice. You could represent more people, like you said, and then you fill the access to justice gap. So, whatever happens there, I think if we innovate with the business model, we could still maybe fill that gap.
Yeah, I think it's going to be hard to stop that from happening, though. Like ethics agencies, including the ABA, have tried to stop these innovations for years. And the fact is, they're almost always going to get overrun by large companies that have more money. It's just going to happen. Yeah. So while I think ethics opinions are nice, in reality, I don't think you're stopping that. I think that's still going to happen. It may just be delayed a little bit. And yeah, I mean, I think you could still innovate as a law firm, but I don't see any reason why law firms and non-law firms, non-lawyers and lawyers cannot partner together. I think it's silly. And it's been going on. This like restrictive covenant stuff has been going on too long. So I'm hoping that ends soon, honestly. And a lot of the attorneys I talk to who are really thoughtful about how they're running their practice and changing things, like I think they're looking forward to that change as well. Like the most innovative attorneys I talk to, they're looking forward to ABS. And that's my approach also. So
yeah, I know the Illinois State Bar Association, or not the State Bar, the Illinois Supreme Court is having like a hearing on a few different aspects of our rules for ethics, and one of them is explicitly saying alternative fee arrangements are okay.
Yeah, oh, that's cool. That's really great.
And so, like they're, at least my state is trying to do something about that, and things like remote court and other aspects that we learned during the pandemic.
Oh man.
So fingers crossed that all of that stuff gets adopted.
Let's do Zoom for everything. I never want to leave my kitchen again.
I'm in like this closet I converted into a recording studio, so I'll never leave this closet again if that's the case. but we got a little off track here, but I just want to bring us back before we end out.
Yes, please. I need help.
Yeah, your consulting business is on a subscription model, right?
Yes, that's right.
So you are personally, your business now, consulting, you're not, practicing law, but you're running a subscription business. So why did you decide to use that model, and what is it like?
Yeah, I think I started this company in like 2015. And the reason why I did the subscription model is just because it's, I think it's better for both parties, frankly. So as a business owner, like it gives you consistent, repeatable, predictable income. And that's really, so if you're leaving one job to go to another job, like leaving a paid job, like that paycheck every 2 weeks, it's hard to move on from that if you're a business owner. But using a subscription model, like you can have an idea of what, like to start with, like you can move beyond this obviously, but like, how do I recapture my salary? Step one. And how many clients you need to do that. And that's great. And that's repeatable. And if it's sticky and you don't have a lot of churn, you can continue to make that money over the course of time and grow it. I mean, I obviously didn't invent the subscription model. Like I picked it up from other software companies, but like not many people were doing it in consulting when I started. And I think relatively few people are doing it in consulting now. But I liked it in particular because not only was it predictable income, it was also a way to force the attorneys I worked with to regularly engage with me. So you get a bill every month. You know that's coming. You need to have these meetings on a recurring basis to move forward in the practice. It just seems to fit really well with this business model. And I've had a lot of success with it, had very little churn. And like I said, I really enjoy developing relationships with people. For my money, like doing this as a subscription model allows me to work with fewer people in a more intense way and move their practices forward more aggressively than I would have if it was like a flat fee arrangement or we talk every so often. Like this is so much better for my business model personally. And then for the clients, like I'm very open ended about this stuff. Like I don't lock people in at all. I'm like, we're going to work on a month to month basis. I may not like you. You may not like me. You have the opportunity to never talk to me again. All you have to do is give me 30 days notice. And I like that model because nobody's forced into any kind of arrangement. I don't like to have those business conversations where it's like, oh, you got 9 more months with me, right? If you don't like it, you can move on. If I don't like it, I can move on. A lot of people are afraid to utilize a model like that. But if you're good at what you do, the vast majority of people are going to like working with you. That's true of attorneys. That's true of consultants. That's true of almost anybody who's a sole proprietor, who has a small business. And that's kind of why I did it. I wanted to have the flexibility, but I also want to have more in-depth relationships with people. And then the financial calculations and figuring that part out is so much easier. And the other piece of it, which I'm not looking to sell my company, but like, it's easier to sell a business like that. I mean, you look at some of these subscription models of these tech companies. I've seen companies sell for like 12x their annual revenue. Just crazy numbers. It's a more valuable model because it's more predictable than other models. And I think that's true of tech companies. That's true of law firms. And one of the reasons, frankly, I tell law firms to adopt subscription models is because that's a more valuable asset than an hourly billing practice. What does that mean? Like most law firms, like the standard law firm, a small law firm sells for 1x its gross revenue. You have systems in place. You have a pricing model that's subscription based. Maybe that's 3x or 4x. That's like real money down the line. So, not to get too far afield and just talk about law firms, same thing for me, same thing for law firms, but there's so many advantages to using a subscription service. And I'm really glad I established it that way. And I don't see myself moving unless somebody comes up with something even more creative than that. But I haven't thought of it yet.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought it back to law firms because that we kind of tie it together in a nice bow at the end here with what you mentioned, something you mentioned earlier, which is using a trade name. So with a trade name
Yes.
and a subscription business, all of a sudden, even if you just want to be a solo for 30 years, you could be a solo for 30 years, and then you could sell your trade name law firm with a subscription business and cash in and have a
Yes.
nice retirement plan.
Yes. And let me extend that even further. When ABS comes, because it's coming, people, your base of buyers is not just law firms, it's tech companies as well. And they got more money than law firms. So how was that? How did I do?
That's excellent. So I'll finish with my classic last question on every episode, Jared, and that is, tell me, is a hot dog a sandwich and why?
Is a hot dog a sandwich and why? No, a hot dog is not a sandwich. I don't believe a sandwich can be represented by a bun. A sandwich to me is two pieces of bread, sliced bread. Unless you watch the new Disney movie Lightyear, say I'm bringing it back there again, they actually have like two meats within a bread as a sandwich, which blew my mind. But no, a hot dog's not a sandwich. Sorry.
That was very clever. I did see Lightyear. I thought that was great. But okay, so then question for you, follow-up question, rare
Yes.
follow-up question to the last
Oh,
question.
exciting.
If you rip your bun in half and still have that hot dog between it and you eat it, is that a sandwich?
Nay, no. All right, so let me take you back to my childhood. I was super poor as a kid. Hopefully my mom's not listening to this. Tangwiches, the whole deal. My family made what are called hot dog sandwiches. And here's how you make it. You take the hot dog, you split it down the center, and then you split it across so it can lay flat, two pieces of the hot dog together. You put that between two slices of bread, not a bun, ketchup on it. Really delightful. Sometimes I'll even make it for myself now because I love it so much. So hot dog in a bun, not a sandwich. Hot dog sandwich, actually a sandwich.
All right. I don't think we're going to beat that. Jared, it was a pleasure having you on the show. Obviously, all the links in the show notes, but where can people find you?
Oh yeah, I'm delighted we got to hot dog sandwiches. By the way, I don't ever get to talk about that. Two places really. Consulting business is at redcavelegal.com, and then the software company is at Gideon.legal. So I'm around both those places.
All right, great. Thanks again.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks again to 650 and Gavel for sponsoring this show. The best way for others to discover this show is for you to share it with someone you think would find value from it. Follow me on LinkedIn, since that's where I'm most active on social media, and click the bell towards the top right of my profile to get notified about all of my posts about this podcast and everything else I think is valuable for you to see. To get in touch, message me on LinkedIn or email Kurbis@lawsubscribed.com. All links are in the show notes. Until next time, this is Matthew Kurbis with Law Subscribed.